hard and what it takes to be a champion. And you had one of your judo students come to you one time in the dojo, in the practice hall, and he said that you were working him too hard. Tell me that story. Do you remember that story?
Oh, very well indeed. It was at the Air Force Academy, and I trained the team there for 2 years, 1961, 62, 63. And it was the first team the Air Force Academy ever had, judo team ever had. And the second year, we had never had a national collegiate championship in the United States. So Yoshu Chida and Yosh was at San Jose State, and he had a very strong team. He always won the nationals because he'd been there for years. Anyway, we formed the National Collegiate Judo Association in 1962, and I hosted the first National Collegiate Championship at the Air Force Academy. So we had a strong cadet team. We had about 45 kids, and we had a season, like all colleges, football season in the fall, track season in spring. Our season was a spring season because our National Collegiate Championship was along in March or April. So we could only train from January, let's say, to May, maybe 4 months. And then I had those 45 young men, and I could train them every day for a couple hours, and like any collegiate team. And so we were training. And somewhere along in there, probably the second or third year, a young man walked up to me in practice. We were working along, and he said, "Coach, you're working us too hard." And I just stopped the whole team, and I sat down. I said, "Sit down." I said, "One of you just came to me, walked over to me," mind you. He walked over to me and said, "Coach, you're working us too hard." Now listen. If somebody says to me, he yells out, "Coach, Joe has just died," and I run over there and Joe is unconscious, and I shake him or something, and Joe comes conscious again, and he says, "Coach, you're working us too hard," and he passes out, okay, I'll go along with it. Or somebody's vomiting violently on the mat. Then you have to crank back because you can't have your players passing out, fainting, and vomiting. You can't practice well that way. Not that anybody cares if you faint or you vomit, because you can't practice if you're doing that. So those are good signs. Now I tell you, I'm talking to the cadet team, I said, none of you have ever thrown up in this class, in this workout. None of you ever passed out. You're a bunch of wimps. You're a bunch of wimps.
Candy asses, I thought you said.
Candy asses. Yeah. So if you can walk up to me and tell me you're training too hard, if you crawl up to me, maybe, I'm ashamed of you. Now get to work. Well, that we had 5 days a week practice, but we also had a voluntary optional practice on Saturday. And that Saturday we had a practice, and I remember the name of the cadet that did it. It was a little guy named Hughes. And on Saturday we were working, and he came up to me during practice and said, "Coach, I think I'm going to be sick." I said, "Good, go out in the hall, don't throw up on the mat." And I stopped the class at a club and I said, "Hey, let's give him a big hand. He's the first man that ever threw up in an Air Force Academy workout." He went out in the hall and threw up. What you say is right. Sometimes you simply outcondition your opponent. You're just in better shape. You can keep going when you can't. I'll tell you, the people that were like that were Nakatani of Japan, or David Starbuck of England back in the 70s. They were just... There was a great British aircraft carrier called Indefatigable. Indefatigable. They were indefatigable. They were... You couldn't exhaust them. They were inexhaustible. It's just one of the things that contributes to great judo teams. And then you've got to have tactics. You've got to have technique, but you have to have tactics. You have to have some kind of a plan for your matches. and if you have that plan and you have the technique to back up the plan, the other guy doesn't have a plan, maybe. Or you know his plan and you can beat it. So that's how the Russians won. They were well coached and they won. They won a lot. They darn near beat the Japanese several times. Not yet. But now I don't know if they ever will, because the Soviet Union, of course, was much stronger than merely Russia. There were 18 nations that were subjugated by the Soviets. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Ukraine, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and so forth. So now the Russian team is good, but not as good as the Soviet team used to be. But they had good tactics. I know their coaches.
Back in the 1970s, you coached a woman judoist. Was she from the United States? What was her name? She won the British
Open.
The British Open in 1974? 1975. And her name was?
Bonnie Cordy.
Bonnie Cordy.
You see, in those years, there was never a women's world championship. The first women's world championship was in 1981, held in New York City. And up until that time, the toughest team, the toughest championship for women, international, was the British Open. And Bonnie Cordy had gone to the British Open in 1974 and had won a silver, and was beaten in the final by a very nice Canadian player named Michelle Boileau. And the next year I took Bonnie, I paid her way and coached her at the British Open in 1975. And we were ready for Michelle Boileau. We had a counter for Ippon Sioe ready. And
Ippon was Michelle's favorite technique?
Yeah, her favorite. And she had
beat her.
thrown Bonnie for Ippon with it the year before. So we were loaded for bear. We were hoping she'd try to use it again. But Boileau had her attack plan was she would use the Ippon Sioe for the first 2 minutes, 5-minute matches, I think, maybe 3 minutes, I don't know. First couple of minutes, she used the Ippon Sioe. If she didn't score, she'd change to left side harai. And so we knew that, and we had a counter for all her stuff. And Bonnie countered her and pinned her for Ippon and won a gold medal in the British Open, which is equivalent to a world championship for women then.
Sure.
It was several years before. So I was coaching international champions then in the 70s, and many, many national champions in the 60s in the college ranks. So I consider my coaching career to have, well, if you count coaching, to have started when I won a national medal. Let's say it starts with 1962 when I won a national medal and coached myself. And it extended for 30 years to 93 or 92.
And how many medals did you win yourself?
Just national medals, just one.
Just one national medal?
Much of a competitor. I started when I was...
Just one?
Yeah.
Most of us have never even come close to winning. Just one.
Yes, but when you talk about medals, you're talking about Anton Giesing, who won 18 all-category championships of Europe and 2 gold medals in Olympic gold, 2 world gold medals and Olympic gold medal. So my accomplishments as a fighter were sufficient to, well, look, when a quarter horse is competing, there is an award that they give quarter horses called Grand Champion. And to be eligible to be Grand Champion, you must have won so many medals in this, so much of that, so much. But you must, as a competitive horse, have run AAA time, at least once. And then all the other things like Western roping and show horse and all that. You have to do that too, but you must have a competitive basis. And so, put it this way, as a fighting Yodan, I went through the mill.
Mm-hmm.
And the year I placed in the National 63 in Fresno, I saw Kotani Sensei, my teacher, and he said, Pota-san, you come my room. I have presento. Well, he was like a father to me, so I thought he had some present from Japan, a presento. We give present. So I went to his room and he gave me my Yondan certificate from Kodokan. So I'm a Kodokan Yondan, which means I'm a Renshi. What does that mean? Renshi means you're a skillful fighter. You've been through the mill. You've been beat up. Leggett, T.P. Leggett won his 5th Dan, 1 rank higher, the day before Pearl Harbor in Japan. So that's a hell of an achievement. But all I can say is I've been through the mill, and I often think what a blessing that was. To have been pounded as we have been pounded in judo, to go into a dojo and like the Budokai in London in the 50s, you just bow in, stretch a little, and start fighting. And you fight desperately for 2 hours, and you get beat to pieces. Maybe you throw some people, you get thrown. And then you quit. And that's the workout. There isn't any teaching. Every 6 months you may say to some teacher, to Leggett Sensei or Koizumi Sensei, Sensei, I have trouble with Osotogari. Can you show me? And he says, show me. And you say, well, next time pull harder. And that's it for 6 months, or 2 months, or whatever. So the contest, the practice consists of fight desperately for 2 hours. And you just do that. And after months and years, you get tough.